Hi there. Today I thought I'd give an explanation on how the Jacob's Ladder automation works. I released this automation file some 10 months ago, back in October 2023, but I left it to you to figure out how the automation works. But since I'm using this on the Euro 2024 tournament, I thought an explanation might be in order. On the face of it, Jacob's Ladder is a fairly straightforward strategy. It looks for a goal scored in the first 20 minutes, and if there's no goal scored, it then starts drip feeding back bets into the over 1.5 goal market, and it will trade out on the first goal. If there has been a goal in the first 20 minutes, instead of doing that drip feeding on the over 1.5, the automation automatically moves to the over 2.5, and it does the same thing. As soon as a goal comes along, it will trade out. If there's two goals in the first 20 minutes, it doesn't get involved in anything. Although it's easy to extend it to cover the over 3.5 goals. But during my testing, that happened so rarely it wasn't worthwhile. Now, looking at the automation, you'll see it's actually quite complicated, and there's a specific reason for that. Within the automation, if I just pull this over, within the automation there's conditions that you can use specifically for football, and that is the market football fixed score, match period, number of goals, relative score, and second half time. Those are all dependent on a live score feed. If that live score feed is not available, or there's something wrong with it, your automation won't work. I'll flag up this one here, match bet period. This is a new one. This has been introduced after I developed the automation. But again, as I say, it relies on the live score feed being present. So if you wish, you can make use of all these to make your automation a heck of a lot simpler. I went the route that I have gone simply to avoid issues with live score feeds. It means that rather than concentrating on all the big matches where a live score feed will be available, it also gives you the opportunity to apply the automation to lesser markets. In addition to that, it also takes into account some other issues with the live score feed and or Betfair's twitchy finger. So I wanted to make an automation that was universal, if you like, to all football matches, and you didn't need any reliance on a live score feed. And as I say, it tries to mitigate issues with Betfair as well. So it utilises a number of techniques that I've shown you individually over the years, things like linked markets and so on. So let's get into the meat of it. Essentially, it uses rules, repetitive rules, rule execution counts to set up what I call timers to essentially try and identify specific points in the match. Now, from that point of view, it's important that you assign this automation to a market before the game starts. The reason for that is it utilises the moment the match goes in play to actually start the various counters that I've got set up. So the first counter is this one here, estimate end of first half and start of second half. So essentially what that does is it kicks off whenever the match goes in play, or specifically it's looking at linked market, the over under 2.5 market, as soon as that is flagged as being in play. I should point out at this point, because it uses linked markets in that it links to the over 0.5, the 1.5 and the 2.5 market, you need to assign this to a market that's still going to be open towards the end of the game, or at least until the over 2.5 market is closed and you're all done and dusted one way or the other. I tend to assign it to the match odds market, although there's no need to do so. but at the very least assign it to the over and under 2.5 market. So that's what this linked market does. It's just checking to see that the over under 2.5 market is in play, and that sets off the timer. So you'll see it executes 27 times with gaps of 150 seconds. So what does that mean? Well, 27 times 150 divided by 60 for a minute, that gives you 67.5 minutes. So in other words, into the start of the second half, it tries to vaguely attempt to take into account any possible injury time at the end of the first half. So it effectively adds on 2.5–3 minutes at the end of the first half, and then doesn't kick in again or doesn't stop counting until the second half is well underway. That will become important later on. We then have this option here, reset first half, second half counter. So what this actually does, 60 minutes into the game, so in other words at the end of the first half, sorry, at the end of the half-time period, assuming there was no delays, it then resets the counter. But it only does so once that counter has reached 27. So this rule becomes active at the end of half-time, but it won't reset the counter back to 0. The reason for that is the counter is used in two specific ways for putting bets in at during the first half up to the half-time, but it has different bets put in, and I'll explain that in a moment. And then in the second half it resets the counter and starts again. So those are the two sort of important timers, if you like. We then move on to these two rules here, which kick in at 20 minutes. First one checks to see if the over 0.5 goal market is closed. In other words, Betfair's closed it because there's been a goal. Now, although you could use a live score to check if a goal has been scored, my experience is that's really unreliable. Especially if a goal is scored, the market gets suspended, the live score tells you there's a goal being scored, and then a couple of minutes later there's a VAR. And the VAR, in my experience, can last anything from half a minute to 10 minutes. Completely unacceptable. So that's why it relies on the closure of that goal market to confirm that there has been a goal. Similarly, the next one checks to see if there's been 2 goals scored in the first 20 minutes, which means that the over 1.5 market will be closed as well. And those two things are used to determine which market the automation gets involved with. We then set up another counter which is used to control how often the bets are fed into the market. Now you'll notice here that it says number of executions should be less than or equal to 19. Why is that? Well, if we go 19 times 150 divided by 60 gives you 47.5 minutes. In other words, the first half plus 2.5 minutes. So it's giving you a rough estimate of when half time is likely to start. In the past, I was using another market. I was using one of the half-time markets to flag up when half-time started, because that market would get closed by Betfair. However, on 2 occasions, Betfair didn't close that market until after the start of the second half, which was no good. So this is why I introduced the counter for this purpose into the automation. So what that's doing, because although this goes up to 27, because I'm limiting that to 19 as far as this rule is concerned, that controls how the drip feeding occurs. Because as we get on to the drip feeding, you'll see here there's actually 2 versions. The first version puts in bets where the profit is 2.5. The reason for that is that the odds in the first half are below 2. So I found that if I just put in a straightforward bet of 2.5, there was hardly any money going in and the returns were pretty poor. So what I'm doing here is, by specifying that as a required profit, it puts a little bit more money into the market in the first half when the odds are low. And the idea is to try and get a better return in the event of a first half goal. But that required two separate rules for drip feeding in the first half and the second half. So that's why that's set to 19, because once that gets to 19, this rule will stop working. And then in the second half, this rule gets reset to 0, so that will kick in until that reaches 19, where straightforward back bets are put in of £2.5, and of course the odds after the half-time period and into the second half, they start to climb exponentially above 2. So that's the reasoning for that. So on to what the drip feeding is doing. So first of all, in the case of drip feeding into the over 1.5 market, we're looking for no goals being scored. So the over, it just checks once again that the over and under 0.5 market is still active. And it checks for this thing here not having been executed, okay, by that rule there, that condition. So it also confirms that this market, the 1.5 market, is in play, it's active. It also checks to see that the back price is over 1.5. Sometimes it isn't after the 20-minute period. So it will actually hang fire until such times that it hits the 1.4 market. It also checks that it's still under 2, because once it goes over 2, it switches to this rule here. And then finally there's a stop on it, a stop loss if you like, whereby as soon as this rule tries to put in a bet, but my worst case red is worse than 47.5, in other words approaching 50, it will stop, it won't put that bet in, and it will actually trade out for a guaranteed red. But that generally happens once we've reached 20 bets or 20 attempts of this one here. So in other words, this only goes up to 19. If it tries it again and it's not less than or equal to 20, it will stop. You'll see it goes up to 25 there. And that's essentially how it works. And so it takes into account all the issues with regard to live scores. It takes into account any issues with regard to Betfair twitchy finger hitting the suspend button too much. It takes into account, or tries to take into account, any instances of VARs and the corresponding delays that they impose as well. There are some quirks that are deliberately put in there. For example, if a goal occurs right on the 20-minute mark, or pretty darn close to the 20-minute mark, you'll find that when this kicks in, the market will still be suspended, so that won't put in bets. But once the market becomes unsuspended, it will detect that this market is no longer active, it's been closed. And consequently, what will happen is in that situation where a goal is right on that transition point, the automation won't get involved in the match at all. That's just to avoid any potential conflict with regard to the way the suspensions work over that crossover period. And then further down, we have the trading out and the greening up. So if a goal isn't forthcoming by the time our counter reaches 20 or greater, it will automatically trade out. And typically it will trade out, so that really happens about the 70-ish minute mark, and that will trade out typically for a loss of around £25-ish. Yeah, a lot depends on how many bets have gone into the market, and the odds available and all that stuff. Alternatively, the green up over 1.5 goals checks that the over 0.5 goal market has been closed, and it's signifying that a goal has been scored. Confirms that the over 1.5 market is still active, and it has a 30-second delay waiting for the suspension to be cleared before it actually gets involved. And that can be useful on the very odd occasion where you get 2 quick goals and that hasn't counted down to 0. You'll find that this market gets closed because there's been an additional goal, and so you get the full return without actually the need to trade out. So that's an added bonus. It happens now and again, as you can imagine. And then the rest of it is essentially the same, except it's using the next markets up, the 1.5 and the 2.5 market. And the only real difference is that there's a minimum odds requirement of 1.7. But everything else essentially functions in exactly the same way. And it's only these 2 rules here that determine which market the automation gets involved with. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. If you wish to manipulate things, there's a couple of areas, obviously, apart from the obvious changing your stake and the like. I'm thinking more in terms of the delays. For example, have these drip feeds and these rules here. If you want to leave the match until, let's say, 25 minutes in or 30 minutes in, just do that. Change the start time for each of these rules. And also, in addition to that, you might want to adjust the actual timings. So at the moment, things essentially trade out around about the 70-minute mark. You can change that by adjusting the step size, or indeed the number of times it executes on this one here and this one here. Okay guys, that's the explanation of how the Jacob's Ladder, as well in the way that I've implemented it, how it works. Okay, I hope you're doing okay on the Euro 2024. I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers guys.